Hey y'all, what is up? Keasbey here, and today we're going to be talking about some Purrely rulings, tips, and tricks that you absolutely need to know before you pick up and start playing the deck. We'll be covering everything from Amazing Defenders and Cyberstorm Access. I'm not going to be talking about the Duel's Nexus support here since that's a ways far away off, but some of this is going to apply to that as well. Couple things up top. Some of this video has been covered in my other Purrely videos, but I'm condensing it down to this one for one convenience reference video. And second, I'm still learning and testing the deck myself, so it's possible there might be some things I miss as well. But anything that I do miss, I'm going to cover in a later video because I plan to continue playing this deck, and I'm really excited to talk about it more going forward. So with all of that out of the way, don't forget to drop this video a like and subscribe to the channel for even more. Alrighty, so let's break this down section by section and start with the main deck monsters. Purrely and Purrely Lily. I'm sticking with the OCG name. I like it more. It's easier to say. So these don't have any weird rulings or anything, but it is important to know that the original Purrely's on summon effect has no once per turn on it, whereas both of Lily's effects are hard once per turns. OG Purrely's effect to reveal a quick play in hand and overlay into an appropriate Xyz monster is a soft once per turn, so you can actually make multiple Xyz monsters if the game allows for it on the same turn, and both Purrely and Purrely Lily do treat these as Xyz summons, so something to keep in mind if you get hit with a dimensional barrier, for example. The last thing I do want to mention is since they are both level 1s in a deck that can now spam out a lot of them, you can play the Lyrilisks among other rank 1s in your extra deck, which opens up even more lines to double Isaias if you need it, but also maybe teching Harpy's Featherstorm if you're considering already main decking triple tactics thrust. Just something to consider. Alright, so monsters, pretty simple. They do more or less exactly what it says on the box. Let's talk about the quick plays. So we have 4 in total: Pretty, Delicious, Happy, and Sleepy. First and foremost, none of these are once per turn in any way, so fire them at will. Happy Memory and Delicious Memory, though, do require quote-unquote targets in order to be activated, whereas Pretty and Sleepy are usable in a totally open board state. I say quote-unquote target because Happy and Delicious Memory do not actually target, which has come up a few times before. While we're on these, the protection effects, while similar, do have a key difference to keep in mind. Happy Memory is protection only from the next time a card would be destroyed by a card effect until the end of the next turn, whereas Delicious Memory is full battle protection until the end of the next turn, regardless of how many times the monster is attacked. This is hugely relevant for OTKing with Epurees Happiness, as you end up giving your opponent's monster battle protection and swinging into it over and over and over and over again, but more on that later. All of the quick plays have a secondary effect as well to discard a card and special summon a level 1 Purrely from your deck. So the bad news first on this. It has to be from the deck, you can't summon it from the hand. Next, because this is an effect that happens on resolution, not activation, all of these can be hit with Ash Blossom and Joy Spring, regardless of if you intend to summon or not, and even if you are using them with no cards in hand and wouldn't even be able to summon on the resolution. Because the check for if you want to summon happens on resolution, there is always a possibility of the game state changing, similar to how Shaddoll Fusion versus Ash Blossom works as well. But now for the good news. If they do hit your quick play with Ash, since the discard is part of the effect, you don't lose a card for it. Also, because, again, not a cost, it allows you to mix in things like Dark World that, while cost discards don't trigger their effects, the Purrely quick plays will. Also, it's all happening on one chain link, and you make the choice to summon or not summon as it resolves, not when it activates. So if your opponent does want to respond to this, they have to respond before you decide if you summon or not. Next, let's talk about the effects that they grant Xyz monsters they are used as materials for. So think of it not as an effect on the spell at this point, but rather it's modifying and adding to the existing effect of the monster, and they stack. So easy one first, Delicious Memory, 300 attack and defense per material. If you have 2 Delicious Memories, you now have a monster with 2 separate but identical effects granting it 300 attack and defense per material. So in practice, you're getting 600 per material, but for the later effects, just remember that from a purely technically correct standpoint, It is 2 separate but identical effects, granting your monster 300 attack and defense per material stacked onto each other. Happy Memory grants an additional attack on monsters per each copy of itself used as material. So, for example, 2 memories, 2 extra attacks on monsters, so stressing the on monster part of that. No matter what is attached, you cannot attack directly after attacking a monster. Alternatively, if you attack directly and then a monster is summoned, you cannot proceed to attack it as the first attack must be on a monster, then you get additional attacks on monsters after that. You can also attack the same monster multiple times if, say, for example, it got battle protection from another quick play. Now, Pretty Memory and Sleepy Memory are the interesting ones, as they both grant soft once per turn effects. Pretty Memory grants the effect that you can send a card you control to the graveyard as cost, then target a card, any card by the way, that your opponent controls and attach it to the monster as material. So first, the send to grave is a cost, so this won't work under Dimension Shifter. Next, because of the way the Purrely quick plays grant effects, if you had 2 Pretty Memories under one monster, you'd essentially have a monster with 2 separate but identical effects reading as the above. So if you have the cost to pay, you can actually attach 2 cards now. So after that, good chance that you have an Epurees with 5 or more materials, and you can go into an Xperlies on top of that. You can now use those 2 effects again since they are part of a new monster's effect. This is how you can end up drawing anywhere from 2 to 6 cards during your opponent's standby phase via Sleeping Memory. Sleepy Memory grants the effect that during your opponent's standby phase, you can draw a card. So you have a Epurees with 2 Sleepies under it, you get 2 separate draw 1 effects, then you use Purrely Leap to overlay into a new Xyz monster with 2 fresh draw 1 effects. A quick note about Purrely Leap and Pretty Memory that will come up with Epurees Plump as well. If you go Chainlink 1 to attach an opponent's card, then Chainlink 2 Purrely Leap, the Chainlink 1 won't resolve since the monster the effect is attempting to attach the card to is no longer on the field. So that's all I've got on the quick plays right now. Let's move on to the other spells and traps. So straight Purrely Street is pretty simple, but don't undersell the no targeting clause on it. It is remarkably strong, and it gets really cool when you use Purrely Leap on your opponent's turn as well. The special summon effect when a Purrely Xyz leaves the field is pretty simple. Something to remember though, a Kaiju is considered leaving the field by an opponent's card, so that will trigger Street. And lastly, don't forget, Street can attach quick plays from the graveyard as well as the deck, so that can cause some weirdness with something like Necro Valley, for example. My friend Purrely, again, pretty simple, does exactly what it says. Same note for if Xyz leaves the field effect because of an opponent's card. The only thing that I do want to call out on this one specifically is nothing about it says you can't just reveal 3 of the same card and randomly get one of those. And Purrely Leap. I mentioned regarding Pretty Memories attachment effect and how it interacts with this already, so all good there. I do just want to mention, like the Purrely summon effects, this is treated as an Xyz summon, so watch out for that dimensional barrier again. And don't forget, while it doesn't come up often, you can rank back down from a 7 to a 2 if you need to for maybe a quick battle phase swap to close out a game. Alrighty, let's look at the rank 2 Epurees. So we've got Plump, Beauty, and Happiness. All 3 share a common effect that thrice per turn, when you activate a Purrely quick play spell, you can attach it as a material to that Xyz monster. So the bad news on this first, it absolutely can miss timing. So for example, you have Purrely Beauty and you activate a memory on Chainlink 1. Your opponent now gets priority to respond and chooses to use Advent of Adventure on Chainlink 2. Because the Purrely effect is a when effect, you miss the timing to attach despite Advent of Adventure having no effect on either the quick play or the Purrely. Basically, you have to use the Purrely attachment effect in direct response to the quick play for it not to miss timing. So basically, you would activate the quick play Chainlink 1, your opponent would get priority, they would not have anything, pass it back to you. Now you can go Chainlink 2 the Purrely effect to attach. Interesting note about this though, if you do something silly, like what I did in my Purrely vs AI replay video, and play the quick play into an infinite impermanence column, While the quick play is going to be negated, because the negation isn't a new chain link activating and just a static continuous effect, you can still go chain link 2 and attach the quick play to your Epurelie monster, despite the fact that it is in fact negated. Okay, let's look at each Epurelie one by one, starting off with Beauty. So again, something shared between all three is they have an effect that you can use when you attach a quick play to them. This effect is similar to the special summons off the quick play in that it is a modular add-on at the end of the attachment effect, meaning that it happens on the same chain link and you decide if you want to do it or not as the chain is resolving, not on activation. This also means that none of these effects target. This is very important to know. So on attachment, Beauty will non-targeted change the battle position of an opponent's monster. Now, all of the Epureles also share a unique effect that gets a modifier if they have the corresponding quick play as material, which 9 out of 10 times they will. Beauty's unique effect is a soft once per turn targeted monster negate. If Pretty Memory is a material, it is now a quick play effect. So I specify soft once per turn because if you have 2 Epurelie Beauties, you now have 2 negates. It hasn't really ever happened that often, but I felt it was worth mentioning. Okay, now let's talk about Plump. Plump's on attachment effect is to non-targeting banish a monster on the field, either side of the field by the way, until the end of the turn. Again, because this happens as an optional effect at resolution of the attaching a quick play effect, it does not target. Your opponent has to choose whether or not they respond, not only before you decide what you want to banish, but before you even decide if you want to banish or not. It is a really cool effect. Plump's unique effect is to target 2 spells or traps in either graveyard, you can mix and match here, and attach them to herself as material. Delicious Memory makes this a quick play as well. Just a note, if you go Chainlink 1, Epurelie Plump's effect to attach from the graveyard, Chainlink 2, Purrely Leap, Plump's effect won't resolve properly due to Purrely Leap causing it to no longer be on the field. Also, another soft once per turn as well. And last, Happiness. Happiness kind of breaks the mold a little bit on its unique effect, but we'll get to that. Its on attachment effect is to bounce a spell or trap your opponent controls back to their hand. Again, same note as Plump or Beauty, your opponent has to respond to this not only before you decide what to bounce, but before you even decide if you are going to bounce at all. Happiness's unique effect is that when it battles, after damage calculation, you can add any Purrely card from your deck to your hand. Then if you have Happy Memory as a material, you can have the attack of a monster on the field. Wouldn't it be crazy if you could give your opponent's monster battle protection and keep adding more Happy Memories for more attacks and having that monster every time you attack it for more searches? Maybe toss a Delicious Memory in there too so that it gets an attack boost? That's wild, right? And in general, all of these can be made generically with 2 level 2s, and their levels allow you to go into Downer Magician and then double Azaius if you need to as well. Sorry, when I said level, I meant rank. Their ranks allow you to do that. XYZ monsters don't have levels. Remember that, important. Okay, time to close out with the big ones, the Xperlies. So both of these can be made generically with 2 level 7s, but again, who's doing that? But seriously though, it is worth knowing. They also share a summon condition that they can be XYZ summoned onto any rank 2 with 5 or more materials. Again, this is not just an Epurelie with 5 or more materials, but any rank 2. However, I don't really know if that's ever going to be relevant, but once again, you should absolutely know that it's an option. They also both gain modifiers to their effects if they have a level 1 Purrely as material, and if they have 5 or more materials under them as well. Xperlies Happiness has the effect that you can detach a material and negate all the effects of monsters your opponent currently controls on the field. So if you have a level 1 Purrely monster as a material, this turns into a straight up super poly clause, saying that there is no responding to this effect whatsoever. Happiness's second effect is, if it attacks, you can hit your opponent for 1500 points of effect damage on attack declaration. So in theory, if your opponent had 1500 or less attack and you attacked into something bigger than Xperlies Happiness and met the 5 material requirement, you'd actually end the game before you even got to damage calculation. This also is not once per turn, so if you have multiple attacks via Happy Memory, that's a nice 1500 points of effect damage per each attack. So she is pretty simple, pretty cool card. Now, the more complicated and very strong Xperlies Towers, I mean Xperlies Noir. So Noir's first effect is detach 2 materials, target a card on your opponent's side of the field or in their graveyard and spin it to the bottom of the deck. This becomes a quick play if you have a level 1 Purrely as a material. And the big effect, if you have 5 or more materials on her, she is unaffected by activated effects. So we covered this pretty in depth in a previous video and all of that still stands, but I'm gonna cover it again here. Generally speaking, the effects of normal and quick play spells and traps or monster effects that are trigger or ignition are all considered activated effects. Anything that comes after a colon or a semicolon is generally speaking an activated effect. So for example, Raigeki, Dark Ruler No More, Infinite Impermanence, Tribute to the Doomed, Compulsory Evacuation Device, all of these are considered activated effects. Anything on a field spell, an equip spell, or a continuous spell that is either a trigger or ignition effect is also considered activated. So for example, if you had a field spell that said, if you summon a monster, your opponent's monster loses 500 attack, Noir would be immune. Again, monster effects that are trigger or ignition, Noir is immune to, such as Ryza the Mega Monarch or Mist Valley Apex Avian. Now, what is Noir vulnerable to? Any sort of continuous effect, so Skill Drain, for example, would be able to negate Xperlies Noir. An equip spell like Snatch Steal would work because it is a continuous effect to take control of that monster. Something relevant to point out here, Noir can be targeted and she can have cards equipped to her. Despite not being affected by certain things, you can still do this, and depending on the effects of those equipped cards, different things can happen to Noir, so something to very much watch out for. Destiny Hero Plasma would also negate Noir, and M-Pen would lock her out if she was in attack position from activating any of her effects. Now, let's talk about some weird ones that affect her that feel like they probably shouldn't. Activated effects that alter the game state can affect Noir. This one sounds really weird, but the best example is Mirror Jade the Iceblade Dragon's effect. When it's removed from the field by an opponent's card, during the end phase, you blow up your opponent's board. Okay, it is an activated effect, but why does it affect Noir? Because it is an activated effect that is altering the game state. When it hits the graveyard, it is activating an effect that really, from a purely, we did it again, purely, from a purely technical standpoint, would read alter the game state so that during the end phase, all of your opponent's monsters are destroyed. Similar to how Dimension Shifter doesn't actually banish anything, but rather alters the game state in a way where everything gets banished instead of going to the graveyard. This type of effect circumvents the protection Noir has. A similar and very relevant case is Dimensional Barrier's negation of the declared monster type's effects. Unlike Dark Ruler No More, whose effect directly interacts with monsters on the field, Dimensional Barrier is altering the game state in a way where the declared monster's effects are negated, and Noir is affected by things like that since game state isn't an activated effect. Okay, so that was my quick primer for what you need to know before you pick up and start playing Purrely. We do have an older video I'll link to where we go through card by card pretty in depth reading what everything does. It was a very early read of them, so some of what I say might be a little outdated and even plain wrong based on things that I learned later, but it will explain at a base level what everything in the archetype does, and all the ruling stuff in that video is correct. Just some of my opinions on some of the cards have changed since then. I'm really excited to keep testing and learning more about these little cats, and I hope y'all stick around for it. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop it a like and subscribe to the channel for even more, and I will catch you all later.